All right. What's good, Knicks Nation? Welcome back to another Game of the Week preview. You already know what it is. We got a big matchup between the New York Knicks and the Minnesota Timberwolves tomorrow. So who better to join me today to break this game down? None other than my guy, Jack Borman. He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves, just Minnesota sports in general for Locked On Minnesota. So make sure to go check him out and give him a follow. All right, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. And make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 instant bonus cash and a free pick. Let's get locked in and get ready for tomorrow's game. Jack, my man, how you doing today, man? How you feeling?
I'm great, man. How are you? I appreciate you having me.
Doing well, man. You know, we were shooting the ish backstage a little bit and having a good time, and then losing a little bit of track of time, man. You know, we were supposed to start a little bit not too long ago, but hey, let's get into the show. Let's talk about this game. I just gotta rip it off because look, you cover the Timberwolves, you cover the Lynx. We're sticking with the Timberwolves today, obviously, but you obviously know a big trade happened this a few days before training camp started. Karl Anthony Towns comes to the New York Knicks. You know, we're third now in the East. What has been your thoughts about the New York Knicks so far after the cat trade?
Yeah, I think my biggest thing when I watch NBA teams is I just love teams that play really hard and get after it and play with joy. And the Knicks certainly fit that description, no question about it. I think it's been really fun as someone who watched Karl and certainly understands his strengths and his shortcomings. Just to see him in a fully optimized setting where you've got a star ball handler that can change speeds and is really good at setting up screens to kind of mitigate some of his deficiencies as a screen setter, around a bunch of just super long, rangy wings that are all pretty athletic and can impact the game and insulate him on the defensive end of the floor a little bit, but also space the floor and be able to, I think really fully maximize his capabilities as a passer and a playmaking hub on the low block and in the mid post has been really fun to watch. I think it's been somewhat gratifying, I think, to see everyone around the country really fully realize what this guy's capable of and kind of start to understand, like, he really had to give up quite a lot to make that Timberwolves team work last season that went to the Western Conference Finals. But, when he is used as a go-to star player on the offensive end of the floor and is playing his natural position as a five, just opens up so much for an offense and is just totally raises the floor of what an offense can be in today's NBA. And so I think you got to give the Knicks a lot of credit for being really smart about the way that they built the team and acquired guys that would really create an environment that Karl could really thrive in. So it's been really fun to see that. And just the way that they've really kind of played the matchups in certain ways and really gone through and played through Karl as the number one option in matchups that have been advantageous for him has been fun to watch. But selfishly too, seeing Josh Hart play as well as he has, he's one of my favorite players in the NBA to watch. And so seeing him just kind of get after it and poke fun at everybody in post-game press conferences has been a ton of fun. And I've really enjoyed watching the Knicks, last season, especially just how much that team fought and how hard they played. And so I was grateful at least that Karl got traded to a place, obviously, that he would enjoy being in and that would be good for him, but is also a team that I've enjoyed watching and have followed somewhat closely for the last couple of seasons. So it's been really fun to watch the Knicks play and hopefully they can run through everybody in the Eastern Conference, because I'll certainly be cheering for them over anyone else.
Okay, let's go. There we go. We got a guy who covers the Timberwolves, a Timberwolves fan out here saying he wants to see the Knicks go all the way, make it to the NBA Finals. That's what I'm talking about, man. And you talk about this team playing hard. It's been up and down, man. It's been up and down. They had a very successful December. January has kind of been a mixed bag. Effort hasn't necessarily been there. Josh Hart's been calling out guys to put their egos aside, be more aggressive defensively, be more locked in. And so it's been a little bit of a roller coaster ride. But to your point for Karl Anthony Towns, I've never been a big fan of Cat. Him coming here, it's like, as you said, you start to see what his game completely looks like. Obviously a different situation. It's not just all on him or young Anthony Edwards that they're trying to like make the entire offense run around. So definitely a different setting. This is definitely the best team he's ever been part of. I'm sure that you would agree with that as well. And so it's been refreshing to like watch him play because there's a lot of things that I saw out in Minnesota. I'm like, and I still want to see him get through some of those demons in the postseason, but definitely right now making me eat my words. And I'm happy. I'm always look, man, being wrong. I'm always happy being wrong, especially if it's in a good light. But watching Cat Man and seeing him perform here, has there been a little bit of seller's remorse from the Timberwolves side?
I think it would depend on who you ask, frankly. I think to start with, I think most fans certainly miss him. I think when you're in a certain place for 10 years, you're a really stand-up guy in the community, and someone who is steadfastly loyal to a place and a franchise that didn't necessarily deserve it at certain stages, depending just on what moves the Timberwolves made or didn't make to try to help build a winner around him. I think, just the fact that he really truly talked the talk and walked the walk of how much he loved Minnesota, I think endeared himself to a lot of fans. And so I think ripping that emotional band-aid off and trading him, especially on the eve of training camp, coming off the most successful season that this team has had in 20 years, and being part of a partnership with him and Ant that has really kind of revived a fan base that certainly loves basketball. And I will tell you that, Minnesota, people like to say it's a hockey state, but I think first, I think basketball is really Minneapolis. It's the city's true love, frankly. And
Mm.
and when they have a basketball team that's really good. I mean, you go back and look at some of the attendance numbers when KG was around. Like this city and the state showed out for basketball, and I think that's what you've seen the last couple of years. And Carl was a huge part of that. So I think from an emotional standpoint, it's been really tough. And you talked about some of those playoff demons. I think it was also hard considering how important he was to the Timberwolves last season and winning those two series. He played damn near perfect basketball in that first series against Phoenix. And then in that second series against the Nuggets, I mean, one of my favorite Karl Anthony Towns stats is that there's no player, and it's so weird, but there's no player in the NBA who has been better at defending Nikola Jokic over the
Mm.
last handful of seasons than Karl Anthony Towns. He's held him to like 32% shooting from the field, and is just giving him fits with kind of his physicality and his aggressiveness on that end of the floor. So, yeah, I mean, you look at that series against Denver, he was really good against Jokic, about as good as someone can be in a 7-game setting against a guy like that. And then you go watch his highlights from that game 7. I mean, no one on the Timberwolves showed up, got off the bus in game 7 in Denver. But Karl Anthony Towns did everything he could to just kind of keep him afloat and keep the team afloat until everyone else could kind of catch up. And they certainly did in that second half and came back and won that game. And I think, Karl didn't play well at all in the Western Conference Finals. He'd be the first person to tell you that. But there's no way they get there without what he did in a massive spot in game 7. So I think, Knicks fans who may be a little leery of some of what he did in the playoffs, I think I would encourage you to go back and watch some of that. But yeah, I think also like fans who understand and recognize the impacts of the CBA and the second apron, I think certainly understand why the Wolves made the trade and when they did it. You don't want to do it after this season when, you don't really have a whole lot of leverage because everyone around the league knows that you have to make a trade just because of financial reasons. And they would have had to move one of Rudy Gobert. And I think, with Karl making more money, he's probably a better player, younger, could probably fetch a better return. And so that's why they did it. But the other part of it, too, that I don't think enough people are talking about, and maybe Knicks fans are starting to think about a little bit more now with Karl just missing a few games, but no one talked about Karl being a little injury prone over the last few seasons after really starting the first 5, 6, 7 years of his career without almost any injuries of any kind. But the surgery that he got last season, with taking kind of a shortcut on that meniscus surgery and coming back in 4 weeks, that almost always has some type of downstream impacts that can lead to, missing some time or having flare-ups or needing arthroscopic cleanup surgeries and things like that. So if you were to run it back and he gets hurt, you're not only dealing with an injured Karl, but an injured Karl that you need to find a way to trade financially.
Mm.
Would have just been really tough for the Timberwolves front office to operate in. So I think, maybe some fans would have seller's remorse. I think it's probably even easier to feel that way, halfway through the season being right at about 500. But again, I think the process was pretty good. And DiVincenzo is certainly starting to play well. And that pick that they got from the Pistons too, is
Hey,
lottery protected. And if the Pistons end up making the playoffs, like that's nothing to sneeze at either, getting a first round pick that you could, either select a player or end up trading the draft rights to someone on draft night and acquiring, another rotation caliber player that you could add to this group. So I personally don't feel any sellers remorse. I understand why they did it. I understand the timing of when they did it. Definitely grateful that he's in a place where he can win, no question about it. But some fans certainly might feel that way.
you're telling me you have no like questions or like thoughts about having this team run it back after making the Western Conference Final and seeing, hey, let's add another piece. Let's see if we can really make another run at this because I understand the CBA and the implication of going past the second apron, not being able to make trades, especially trading your draft picks, or when I say not being able to make trades, and you're like, not only are you financially strapped, but your flexibility is just gone in the moves that you can make. I get that. But you can't tell me there's no part where it's like, you guys haven't made the Western Conference Finals in years, and now you made it, and now you have something that looks to be promising, and then now it's just gone. You're telling me there's no part of you or part of that fan base where it's like, we need that back right now.
Oh, there are definitely parts of the fan base, no question about it. I think fans were certainly upset by the fact that, this team wasn't given the opportunity to get another crack at it, especially considering how good they were defensively. I mean, that was a historically great defense when you look at what their defensive rating was relative to the league average last season, especially in an era where, playing defense is tougher and tougher than ever, just with how much talent is in the league now and how optimized a lot of the shot selection is around the league. But yeah, I think again that the marketing of what the Timberwolves move was and what this team should and could be was off, and it's proven to be that way. I think they kind of said, "Oh, we're going to try to be just as good as we were last year. We're confident that we'll be able to do that." But I think it was more of a, "Hey, can you take one small step back this year to make sure that you can have a really strong team that could be, a more sustainably built contender for the next 4, 5, 6, really through the end of Anthony Edwards' prime." And so, because it hasn't necessarily been marketed that way, I think there's a greater majority of the fan base for sure that would have rather liked to see a second crack at it. But I think me is just being pretty nerdy and understanding a lot of the CBA stuff. I understand at least what the front office was thinking and what they were trying to do. And again, I think I would feel worse about it if Carl got sent to, like the Hornets or or a team like that just has nothing going and doesn't really have that bright of a future.
Salute to Knicks Nation. Thank you all for tuning in for another game of the week preview. With me on the other side is my guy, Jack Borman. He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Lynx for Locked on Minnesota. So make sure to go check him out there. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. So you brought up Dante, you brought up Randle. We all know why the deal was done. Going to the Minnesota side now. How's Minnesota feeling? Because when I log on X or any social media now, or even you go to Reddit and you do some research, and it's like it is such a polarizing response, especially with Julius Randle on the team. Which, hey, watching him for the time that he was here, went through it. Exactly understand that feeling. How are Wolves fans feeling right now about Julius Randle and Dante? It seems like Dante is getting out a little bit out of the rut, but it seems like Julius is falling out of not only the, fan, I don't even know what the word is, I guess, having the leeways with the fan, and it seems now with Chris Finch because, he's not playing in the final few minutes of games now.
Yeah, I think, at the start of the season, Randall was pretty good, and Dante really, really struggled. And Dante was kind of the first person to tell you that. And he actually said that he had a conversation with Dennis Schroeder, I believe is who he was. I'm like 95% sure it was Dennis Schroeder that he talked to just about moving teams. This was when the Warriors were in town right after Dennis Schroeder got traded to the Warriors. I think the first game he played in was in Minnesota against the Wolves. And Dante said he talked to Dennis Schroeder and just said, like, "Hey man, you've got to let last season go. I know you're probably holding on to being this second option for a Knicks team that was a ton of fun to watch in the playoffs. You had, 37 points or whatever it was in that game and had the Garden absolutely on fire. And that's probably a super intoxicating feeling. And you're really close with a lot of the guys on that team, but you've kind of got to let it go and just focus on right now where your feet are and be you and just play your game. And really since then, Dante's been really, really strong. And you look at just what he's been able to do from October to November to December to January. He's grown in every single month. And so I think fans really love Dante DiVincenzo and really appreciate,
Understandably.
especially from a guard position, what he does on the offensive and defensive glass, and just how aggressive he is and just making extra effort plays and diving on the floor for loose balls, tracking down 50-50 rebounds, getting in and mixing it up with some big guys and
Instant
trying to
fan favorite because of that moxie that he's got.
totally. And then you add in the 3-point shooting and a lot of the, just the clutch shot making in general. I mean, last night he went shot for shot, band for band with Steph Curry down the stretch in crunch time, and was doing everything he could to keep the Timberwolves in the game, and just had Target Center on fire. And unfortunately, he's not going to be able to go tomorrow night because he hurt his left foot very late in that game in like the last 2 minutes. He has a left big toe sprain is what the team's calling it. So it might be a little bit of an extended absence, which is unfortunate because he started the last 8 games of the season and was averaging 15, 5, and 4 on 42-40 shooting splits from the floor and from beyond the arc. And then when he's played at least 30 minutes in a game this season, he's averaging 20.6 boards, 4.5 assists on 47-45 shooting splits. So he's really been phenomenal when he's got an extended run. And Chris Finch now has really started to trust him and has closed with him over Mike Conley. And I think when you've watched the Timberwolves and watched how unorganized some of their offense has been in recent years, especially late in games, it's been hard for Chris Finch to let go of needing to have Mike Conley in the game. But it speaks volumes to just how well Dante is acclimated. And the fans certainly love Dante. But I think on the other side of it with Randle, Minnesota and Minneapolis specifically are blue collar places, no question about it. And I know New York is the same way in that they appreciate guys who will die on the floor because they're giving it everything they have, especially on the defensive end of the floor. They're playing physical, they're playing hard, they're playing tough. And Julius Randle is just not that player, frankly. And I know there's people who are listening to this who are probably big fans of Julius Randle, but I would invite you to turn on any Timberwolves game this season and watch Julius Randle play defense off the ball. It gives you a headache.
We already know what it
Yeah,
is.
I mean, it gives you a headache just watching it. And I think knowing how hard this Timberwolves team played defensively, everyone was flying around. Everyone's giving it everything they have to watch Randle be the cause of so many defensive breakdowns and fans seeing it and watching it and moaning and groaning just when he has the ball because he's been really sticky with the ball for most of the season is, and understandably so. Like it's a different role for him. It's a different offense. You're trying to figure out, how to play and where you fit in. But earlier in the year, he did a great job of driving into the middle of the lane and kicking the ball out. And he was a huge reason why the Timberwolves created a ton of 3-point shots in the early part of this season, and then kind of got away from it with a lot of isolation ball and just over dribbling and just really tough mid-range fall away contested shots that I'm sure you've seen way too many of in your time as a Knicks fan. But yeah, so I think fans, for the most part, the overwhelming majority of fans are pretty out on Julius Randle. And I think they know that the writing is on the wall that, he's probably not going to be around for more than the next 2 or 3 weeks in all likelihood. So I think it hasn't gone super well. I think Randle, tried pretty hard to make it work in the early part of the season, especially offensively. But I think just some of the defensive breakdowns and his inability to kind of get comfortable with the scheme and do what he needs to do. And his inability to really affect the game consistently as a rebounder, I think has not endeared himself well to Chris Finch or to the fan base. And so I think, acquiring Julius Randle was much more a means to an end of trading Carl and getting off that contract. And Dante DiVincenzo was the guy that they really wanted to keep around long term because we all know it's a great contract. So yeah, it's been kind of that Randle started up here, DiVincenzo started down here, but they've
and now it's
kind of now
completely
done
flipped.
the opposite flip on
It's
the graph as time's gone on.
it's so fascinating that you said, he's not rebounding at a high level because he was one of our strong rebounders here. And I even say, like, even last year, like, we saw, like, I saw the improvement him offensively. Yeah, he's going to be a black hole at times where he could just hold on to the rock. You passing the ball, you have no idea if we're going to get it back. But, I think the question that some fans still have and they're still lingering on to is like the January where the Knicks just went on like a 12-2 run. And it's like, oh, wow, what could have been, because that was some of the best basketball he even played. Just moving the ball, being like a really good facilitator. Scoring was more efficient for him. It was getting downhill, wasn't like putting up a lot of mid range shots as he's done in the past. So it's just fascinating to go to a new place and we've seen that before, but it's like everything that you saw, like just to see the trajectory of like him getting like improving his game year after year, and then completely like throw that away because it's not working for him in Minnesota. Fascinating. So where do you see this trade going, man? You say in 2 weeks you don't see him being on the Timberwolves. What teams would be looking for him? Because that's you know it's not a horrendous contract. In the right situation he could be good, but who's going to be trading for Julius Randle to fit that offensive scheme that you'd need to build around him?
Yeah, I think it's much more the Julius Randle to one of my friends made a great point earlier this week talking to him that Julius Randle is a guy that is great at helping you go from 25 to 30 or 30 to 35 wins. But if you're asking him to help take a team from 47 47 wins to 55 wins or 55 wins to 60 wins, it's just not going to work quite as well because it's hard for him to sustain the type of play that is required to be that good of a team over the course of a season. When you talk about just how his ball movement waxes and wanes, his impact as a playmaker waxes and wanes. Some games he just decides to take 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 super contested mid-range shots instead of getting to the rim or taking corner threes or things like that you'd like to see more of from him. So I think you'd probably be looking at just trying to salary dump him, frankly. And I think for the Timberwolves, what you're trying to do is I think if you can get underneath the second apron, so if you can trade Julius Randle for a smaller expiring contract, whether that's one expiring, two expirings, whatever the case may be, because the Timberwolves do have a roster spot. I think whatever you can do to get under that second apron is going to be really important for the Wolves, just because I think it would unlock a little bit of flexibility for them this year. And I think the tough part too is if Randle were to stay and he were to opt in, which I think is at this point seems like it's going to be the pretty likely outcome that he's going to opt into that contract for next year at just about $31 million. It'd just be really difficult for the Timberwolves to retain Naz Reid and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who are obviously two guys that really have fit what the Timberwolves want to do on both ends of the floor. So I think that's certainly part of it. But right now, I mean, the Timberwolves need to shed $16 million in salary, $16.2 million in salary to get underneath that second apron. So I think for Randle, if you can trade Randle for an expiring contract that's less than $14 million coming back. I think certainly that the Wolves are going to take a look at that. I think a team like Detroit is one that is certainly looking to be buyers at the trade deadline, considering that they've been playing better and
Interesting.
want to continue to build and grow. So that's certainly one that you'd look at. I think, and they too were reportedly interested in Randle when the Knicks are kind of shopping him around this
Huh.
summer. I knew that Miami too was another team that had some interest in Randle. So you'd think like, okay, well, could the Wolves work in as a third team in the Jimmy Butler trade? But it sounds like, or kind of feels like Jimmy's going to end up either staying in Miami or as a member of the Bucks at this point, and the Bucks could easily accomplish that trade without Randle's contract in the mix or Randle going back to Miami. So it's tough to pin down exactly where he would land, but a team like Detroit, I think could make some sense when you consider some of the contracts that they could offload as well.
And I mean, you also got, as you talked about and brought up in the earlier of the show, is that you got Detroit's first round pick. So you could, I mean, if you're salary dumping, you're not just taking a player. That means you got to throw some picks or a pick in there that's enticing as well. So if it's Detroit, you could say, hey, you're playing pretty well. You may want this first round pick back too. So that would be interesting, man. Randall on Detroit, very interesting indeed. I like. I'm actually very curious to see how that all plays out. I'm laughing because I'm like, you know, you go from New York to Minnesota, you go from a good city to a good city, and then you got to go to Detroit. And I'm like, wow, this is whoo, tough, man, tough, tough, tough. But hey, it ain't for me, man. It ain't about me. It's all about that. It's all about them. So it is what it is. Salute to Knicks Nation once again. Thank you all for tuning in for another game of the week preview. With me on the other side is my guy Jack Borman. He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves for Locked On Minnesota. So make sure to go check him out over there. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button for your boys. All right. So let's get back onto Minnesota. Enough talk about Randle. What's the expectation for this team? Like, you made this trade, salary dump. You're like, you're teetering where it's like, depending on the nights of how everybody plays, you could be a top 6 team or you're going to be in the play in. Is the expectation play in this year just to reset, make Ant-Man the face, and see what happens moving forward? What's the goal?
I think the goal is certainly still to make the playoffs. I think you want to get these guys as much experience being in the fire, going through the fire in the playoffs together as you can possibly get. So that's certainly the goal, no question about it. I think you look around the Western Conference landscape right now, and it's not an unattainable goal by any means. I think Timberwolves have lost a decent amount of games that they probably should win. Chief among them last night at Target Center against the Warriors, playing without Kuminga and Draymond Green, Podziemski, Kyle Anderson. So, but they're only 3 games out of the 4 spot right now. And so when you look around the West and you look around how all these teams just kind of beat up on each other, how all these different teams are struggling with injuries, you look at some of the teams ahead of them between, I think Houston's probably going to come down to earth a little bit. I think, Denver, they're an injury or two away from really struggling and losing a decent amount of games. Lost the Lakers, you never know what's going to happen. The Clippers, you never know what's going to happen with those stars among those 2 teams. So I think it says more about everyone else in the Western Conference, frankly, than it does about the Wolves right now. I just don't think it takes a ton, to be able to stand out above some of those teams right now. And I think too, the biggest thing for the Timberwolves is that the spacing has just been really tough. And when you have a starting lineup of Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert, 2 of those guys can shoot threes, but that's not really what they want to do. They want to be able to kind of put the ball on the deck and get all the way to the rim or pull up and elevate over guys in the mid range. I think there's just not a whole lot of spacing around Anthony Edwards. And with Mike Conley struggling to shoot the ball from 3 in the early part of the year, that's part of why Donte DiVincenzo started the last 8-9 games, whatever it's been, to try to relieve some pressure there and have a really dynamic shooter that can make it a little bit tougher for teams to double Randle on the drive or double Ant on the drive, and be able to open up some more one-on-one matchups and driving lanes for those guys, or just be able to move the ball around. And DiVincenzo is a guy that's going to make quick decisions, whether it's passing, shooting, driving, those types of things that just make him a good player to play with. That helps improve the spacing for everyone on the floor. And so I think for the Wolves, it's just about whatever you can do to prioritize the spacing, whether Randall's there or not there, whatever you can do to prioritize getting more space for Ant, for Randle, is going to be better off for the team, just because I think when you have Rudy Gobert in the front court, I mean, he's an otherworldly defensive player who makes up for so many guys' mistakes on that end of the floor. It's one of the best screen setters the league's ever seen. And but there's just not a whole lot that he offers you outside of those 2 things. And certainly if you're not playing or you don't have a 4 or a 3, frankly, that's pretty cognizant of where Gobert is at all times and how to space around a guy like that, it can clog things up pretty good. So it really, how high the Timberwolves can climb in the standings, I think, will depend on if they can kind of remedy some of the spacing issues they have and get up more threes and really continue to shoot the ball at a high clip. I think if more spacing, more 3-point attempts they'll have, and less turnovers they'll have, because we'll get into it a little bit later, but turnovers has really been this team's problem all year.
For sure. And that's like what I've been seeing all over the place, is that it's turnovers, it's the spacing. I mean, we kind of all knew the spacing would be an issue as soon as Randall went over there. You're like, you know, you knew Connolly and Edwards could be decent 3-point. You would expect those 2 to be the decent 3-point shooters, but then everybody else to fill in is like, is there going to be enough spacing out there? And how do you work Nas Reed into those rotations
and the
too?
spacing too last year was tough, and you had Karl Anthony Towns out there with Gobert.
Yeah.
And Mike Conley shot like 42% or 43% from 3 last year. So if the spacing was tough last year with Karl and with Mike shooting it that well from 3, just kind of gives you an idea of just how tough it's been so far this season.
I mean, you even have Ant-Man complaining about getting double teamed and not having enough for
That
the
was
drive. I mean,
crazy.
he's been settling for a lot more threes. Every time I tune into a Timberwolves game, I'm like, wow, that's not really his game. This is a guy that likes to get downhill and be aggressive. And watching Ant-Man take more threes is just a little bit. It's just been a little shocking. So obviously, you said want to make the playoffs this year. That's the goal. Even with trading Randall and looking to get like guys get expiring contracts back. What's the future outlook for this team? Like what because going back to the earlier topic, you made it to the Western Conference Finals. You then trade Karl Anthony Towns. You get Julius, who now you're ready to ship out of town. What's the outlook of this team? Is it just like, you know, we're gonna figure it all out where the chips may land just because you got Tim running the helm over there. You see what the Denver Nuggets did, even though he doesn't get the ring, he left right before he could have gotten the ring, right? Is it just a lot of faith in Tim being able to put something together based on what he did in Denver? What are fans and everyone's working off of at this point?
Yeah, I think certainly there's a lot of faith in Tim Connolly. I think, something that is top of mind right now, considering, we're getting close to the trade deadline. Randall's starting to play better. To his credit, Julius has been really pretty strong over the last handful of games, 6, 7 games, which has been great to see. But think back a couple of years ago when D'Angelo Russell was on the Timberwolves. Everyone really thought that the Wolves are going to trade D'Angelo Russell in the summer before that season. And Tim Connolly is known around the league to be incredibly patient. He doesn't want to do things until he has to do them for the most part, and tries to maintain leverage that he has for as long as he can. And he let the dice roll with D'Angelo Russell a couple seasons ago, and D'Angelo Russell from really the start of December all the way through the trade deadline was phenomenal. He averaged like 20 points, 6 assists, shot like 42% from three over that stretch, played really strong, and you were able to turn him into Mike Conley, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and not one, not two, but 3 second-round picks, one of which ended up being used on Leonard Miller, who's been the G League Player of the Month a couple of times so far this season. Or 6'10", kind of Lamar Odom type of player. And so certainly that's nothing to sneeze at. And I think that he's made a ton of pretty shrewd moves around the margins since becoming the president of basketball operations that have certainly endeared himself to Timberwolves fans. And I think Timberwolves fans do trust Tim Connolly. I think the Karl trade made it a little tough to stomach that and trust that. But again, I think the long-term goal of this team is how you can optimize everything around Anthony Edwards and Rudy Gobert to a certain extent. Because I think Gobert has been really important for unlocking some advanced growth as a scorer with how much space he creates as a screener, and just helps stabilize things defensively and create such a high floor for what your team can be on the defensive end of the floor, that I think you really just got to figure out what guys are going to stay and what guys are going to go when it comes to building the team around those two guys. I think Dante is certainly a guy that will be in the long-term plans. I think Rob Dillingham, whom they drafted either 8th or 9th overall last year after a pretty unique trade with the Spurs, trading like a 2031 first to go up and get Dillingham on draft night. He'll be the long-term point guard option, they hope. And then, are Jaden McDaniels and Naz Reid going to be able to take pretty big steps forward for the rest of the season? I think will determine one, for Naz, how much he'll get in free agency, because the expectation is that he'll return to Minnesota, but it's just a matter of what that price tag will be in free agency, because he will be an unrestricted free agent. And then with Jaden McDaniels, they signed him to a 5-year contract extension. And this is year 1 for him in that contract extension. So I think, that's a pretty big contract number for someone like Jaden McDaniels, who hasn't necessarily been a huge contributor on the offensive end of the floor. We all know what he can do as a Swiss Army knife defensive player that's really strong on the perimeter, will always guard the other team's best player, but he's also a really good backside rim protector as well. And so trying to figure out which guys stay, which guys go for the rest of the season, I think is going to be really important. And then from there, it's just going to be about trying to develop the guys that you have internally, because they did also draft TJ Shannon from Illinois, who's a really strong college player, averaged, in the high 20 points per game last season at Illinois, and has had some really strong showings in the G League. And then they also have guys like Josh Minott and Leonard Miller too, who, are pretty cost controlled guys that can impact the game on both ends of the floor, and, are pretty low usage guys that should slot in well as long-term options. So I think it's just trying to suss out which of those guys you want to keep long-term, who you're going to try to consolidate once you're going to have access to some of this draft capital, once the picks that they owe to the Jazz from the Gobert trade now start to become tradable again in the future. So I think everything's about Anthony Edwards and Gobert to a certain extent. I don't think they're looking to trade Gobert
Mm.
by any means. So it's just going to be really an evaluation period, I think, for the rest of the season. And wherever you end up is wherever you end up. And I think you try to do everything that you can to try to make this 1 year maybe more of a speed bump than hitting a wall, if that makes sense from a development perspective.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, look, you got essentially, I guess the way that you got to look at it at this point is that you want Ant-Man to be the guy. He's still so young that, most guys don't start winning championships until like they're 27, right? 27, 28 is usually around, you're in your prime at that point where you're matured mentally, you're matured, your game has matured. You've probably gone through enough playoff scars that you know how to manage the regular season, how you're supposed to manage the postseason experience. And so they essentially have time, but before you know it's going to be here. So it's just going to be fascinating to see how Connolly puts all of this together, where it was like, wow, success, now we're rebuilding to a degree. And it's
It is
like,
a very odd sell and position to be in, but again, it just speaks to the power of the second apron
yeah, it
and
really does.
what we've seen it do. And like, I can't remember if the mics were on officially when we were talking about this earlier, but like, the Carl Supermax, the Rudy Gobert trade, like that stuff happened before the second apron
Mhm.
was ratified. And if the Carl Supermax happened after, it's like you're not going to not sign a guy to a Supermax. There's never been someone who's earned a Supermax extension who hasn't signed it, and
Mhm.
that's part of the tax you pay, I guess, for being a small market team. Is that like, maybe there are some guys that are going to put up good enough numbers that are going to earn a All NBA spot who maybe aren't quite as valuable as some of the other Supermax guys, but yeah, that's the reality of where things are, and it's definitely been a tough sell to some of the fans, like we were talking about earlier, and it's unfortunate, but that's reality. And I think whatever you can do now to try to clean up some of the financial stuff so that you can really have kind of a blank slate to build around Ant and build a really sustainable winner. Because I do think even some of the long-term pieces they have that that aren't going to get traded are still really solid players between DiVincenzo and Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels and Rob Dillingham that that'll be around and fun to build around.
I like Dillingham, man. I do expect some good things for him in his future. Salute to Nick Station. Thank you all for tuning another game of the week preview. With me on the other side is my guy Jack Borman. He covers the Minnesota Timberwolves for Locked On Minnesota, so make sure to check out his work. Make sure to stay locked in. And everybody, after you hit the thumbs up button for your boys, and after you subscribe to the channel, you also know who you got to support. Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you about Underdog Fantasy. I love playing it. It's a lot of fun. I know CP's been talking about doing another draft because 2-0, man. 2-0 to start this year between me and CP in these fantasy drafts. Thank you for the lunch money, my man. I'll be taking more of your money tomorrow after I defeat you again, and I'll be oh so grateful for it. But hey, outside of drafts, which you could do for any NFL, NBA, whatever it may be that you're into, you can also do the pick'ems. So all you got to do is you choose 2 to 8 players. The more players you choose, the bigger the reward could be. And all you got to do is just choose higher or lower on any statistical category. So it could be points, rebounds, assists, whatever it may be, or the combination of all three. And it doesn't have to be just one sport either when you create your ticket. It could be multiple sports. You could choose the NBA, NFL. You could choose MLB. Obviously, it's not in season. NHL. You could put all those different players on one ticket and just choose higher or lower and try to earn some cash. So make sure to support our sponsor, Underdog Fantasy. Use that promo code KFTV to get up to $1,000 in instant bonus cash and a free pick. Once again, that promo code is KFTV. All right, Jack. Let's get into the real conversation now. Now that we got through all the pleasantries, the storyline, stuff of that nature, let's talk about the game itself and let's get ready to break this thing down. So let's get into some key stats. I always like to go through some key stats because you know it's going to dictate how this game unfolds. And we can also go over the previous game too, since they played earlier in the season, or I should just say in December, not too long ago.
That game
Um,
didn't happen.
No,
No,
I know
no,
you.
I
That
don't
game didn't
think
happen
that
for you,
game
but that
happened.
game certainly happened
I
for
don't
us.
remember anything like that
I
happen.
remember a nice homecoming for one Karl Anthony Towns, and I remember a former New York Knick on that side that started off the first quarter really hot and tried to will that team to victory, and then it all went crashing downhill. But hey, if that's to each their own. I, you may have run into that Men in Black, and they would have made a hit you with a pen. Who knows? It's all good. But let's talk about tomorrow's game, man. And we'll get into Timberwolves, their top 10 defense based off the defensive rating. One of the big things they're also good at is stopping the 3-point shot. Although they didn't do that in the last game against the Knicks. Knicks shot over 40% against them. That's something that the Timberwolves can still hang their hat on. Most teams shoot just a shy under 35% against them. That's just a testament to how good these guys defend. I wonder if the Knicks can replicate it. The Knicks have been on a good shooting spree right now. These last two games, they were in a rut for about what was like 9 to 10 games, but now it seems like they're working their way back out of it. And I'm wondering if now being home, you got two good games where you're starting to shoot well from downtown. If they can go against Minnesota and take advantage of this, I think this is going to be one of the biggest breaking points for Minnesota, just because Knicks, efficient wise, one of the top teams when it comes to shooting the three. I know Timberwolves offensively, they struggle, and especially when it comes to three. We just talked about it. That starting five, I know they just added Dante to add more spacing, but still not really enough 3-point shooting as what the Knicks have. This game is where I think this game is going to be dictated by if the threes are falling tomorrow night for the New York Knicks.
Yeah, no question about it. And shout out to Underdog. I'm bummed that now Dante is going to be out. My favorite anchor pick that I've had is Dante over points,
Hmm.
rebounds, and assists. It's been pretty undervalued for a while. So I've enjoyed cashing out on that with some other stuff. But without him, obviously they lose an important shooter and a guy that's been really efficient in that chaser role on the defensive end of the floor. Run around guys that fly off screens and shoot threes. But for the Wolves, part of the reason why they have such a strong defensive 3-point field goal percentage is they do a really good job of forcing teams to take their 3-point shots from above the break, right? As a defense, you want to have your opponents shoot as many above the break threes as you can and those mid-range shots, which, Gobert does an excellent job of keeping teams away from the rim and forcing them to play in there. But what the Knicks do is they do such a good job of spacing the ball and sharing it and cutting that it can kind of break down the backside of the defense and open up those cross court skip passes to create open corner 3-point shots. And so, I think with guys like Mikal and OG and Karl to a certain extent from his experience playing with the Wolves last season are all really good corner 3-point shooters and guys that are ready and willing to let it rip from there. So I think if the Knicks can do a good job of creating plenty of corner 3-point opportunities, which I certainly think that they can, given their given all their wings that do a really good job of sharing the ball, making the extra pass, and playing really drive and kick style basketball around that Karl and Jalen, 2-man game. I certainly think that they can cause problems for the Timberwolves. I think it's a pretty horrible matchup, frankly, for the Wolves defense, and I think that obviously too playing with Karl that'll force Rudy Gobert to play away from the basket if they do have stretches where Randle's not going to be guarding him. I think, we saw last time, I believe that Achua started in that game alongside Karl. And so you had Randle on Karl and Gobert on Achua, but we're probably not going to see that same alignment tomorrow. So it'd be interesting to see if the Wolves place where they place Gobert, because I think if they place Gobert on a perimeter player and dare one of those guys to beat them shooting the ball from three, that'll be I think pretty telling of what the Wolves want to try to take away. And so I think, again, if you can just contain Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges and OG off the dribble and force those guys to just make passes to guys that are one pass away, I think that'll be really important. But when they start to all get in the paint and throw skip passes and just collapse the backside of the defense, it really compromises the Wolves and what they try to do.
And the Knicks are also pretty comfortable shooting above the break as well. I mean, that's where Cat
Totally.
loves. That's where Cat loves to shoot. I mean, he's totally fine with doing that. And then the guys who are going to be shooting the most corners is going to be definitely OG and Bridges, but Brunson just as comfortable. Hart, who's been very good at shooting the three ball this year, is comfortable, been shooting all over the place. So honestly, there's not really a weak spot when I watch this team of where they like to shoot the three. So definitely will be interesting in tomorrow's matchup. Another strong suit for the Timberwolves is that looking at their defense again, they're really good when it comes to protecting the paint. You know, they're ninth right now when it comes to limiting opponents. When it comes to shooting efficiency in the paint, this is another area where the Knicks love to do. They like to get into the area. They're the fifth best team. You know, they're averaging about what 52, close to 53 points per game in the paint. And so this is going to be another battleground that I'm looking for the Knicks to challenge. And it's going to be difficult because you got Rudy Gobert, you know, Karl Anthony Towns is questionable for tomorrow. If he does, we saw that matchup, how it went the first time where Cat will easily, as you just talked about, Cat will easily go at Rudy. Like that's no problem for him. It's will they do the matchup of Julius on Cat, and then I guess you'd have to do Gobert
on Hart.
on Hart. And so I'm wondering if that is going to play out because they went away from that, which was very shocking. It was working out for them very well in the first, and then go away from that, and then second quarter, you know, Knicks just started to pile on.
Yeah, that didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me, why they went away from that in the moment that night. But yeah, I think, the one thing that the Timberwolves have done a pretty good job of throughout the course of the season is just they're doing a good job of controlling the paint for the most part. I think you look at their points in the paint differential, so how many points they score versus their opponents the last 5 games. They're 11th in the league at plus 2.8, and the Knicks are right around the league average at zero, a flat zero. And so yeah, I mean, last 5 games, Knicks are fourth in the league and points in the paint, 54 a game, and Wolves are fourth defensively at 43 a game. So it's strength on strength there. And I think whether or not Karl plays has a ton to do with it. But yeah, I think the other part of that too is certainly the rebounding portion of it, because Wolves have been struggling on the backboards and have been allowing a lot of second chance opportunities. And even against the Warriors, like Trace Jackson Davis last night killed them on the defensive glass, or on the offensive glass, excuse me, in the Knicks the last 5 games. 36.1% offensive rebounding percentage is second in the NBA. In the last 5 for the Wolves, 66% defensive rebound rate, which is 24th in the NBA, and the league average for defensive rebounding is right around 71%, and the league average for offensive rebounding is right around 29%. So yeah, if Karl plays, I certainly think that he'll be a major factor on the offensive glass. And Rudy, if you look at his individual defensive rebounding percentage, has totally nosedived this season. I think he's been asked to defend a lot more shots, and the defense hasn't rebounded as well behind him. And two, I just think that he isn't boxed out as well. And Karl's a really physical and really strong guy that I think will be able to move Rudy around. So whether or not Karl plays and it's next man up, and that's going to be Achua in there, or Jericho Sims, Minneapolis native Jericho Sims getting out there on the block. I think
On the trading block or on the actual block? What's
on the
going on
actual
here?
block, jumping sky and above everybody. So yeah, that'll be an interesting matchup to see for sure.
I don't know if you heard, but Jericho Sims is being shopped around, so that's why I had to throw it out there. Another guy who's just had an up and down season. I mean, he played very well last night against the Philadelphia 76ers, but they didn't have a traditional big out there, so it was a nice time for him to work it up, man. Just showcase yourself a little bit,
Hey,
man. Try to get something in return for yourself.
I will say I played for the same traveling basketball team that Jericho played for growing up, and he and me, I'm pretty sure we're in the same age.
Oh
We
wow.
both graduated from high school in the same year. And I'll never forget being at a tryout. Jericho looks over at me, and he just goes, he's like, "Hey, if I go like this, if I point up, I want to throw a lob." And seeing Jericho Sims throw down an alley-oop dunk finish in 5th grade was like, or 6th grade or whatever it
Sixth
was.
grade.
I mean, you see the way he
Holy
jumps. I
cow.
mean, it's absolutely
Oh, for
insane.
sure. It's
So
absurd. The hops are absurd. I mean, I think that man can just like can touch the top of the backboard. I mean, that it's just like he is. It's absurd how high he can actually jump. I wish the dunk contest was a little bit better when he was in it, but hey, that's a whole other story. But yeah, man, certainly has some hops, got some strength over there. Showcasing yourself after yesterday, Jericho. Showcasing yourself. All right. Hey, man, is what it is. But look, so we got 3 points. We got points in the paint. You know, I don't really see fast break points being a big thing in this game between these two teams. I feel like the first tour is definitely what it is. I
And
don't even remember it that much in the
I've
first
got one for
matchup.
you.
What?
There's just turnovers, no question about it. I mean, that's been the biggest thing for the Timberwolves. I think you look at, turnover percentage. The Knicks are fifth in the league, 13.5%. Wolves are 25th. So I
Hmm.
think if the Wolves continue to really struggle turning it over, I mean, the Knicks are plus 4.5 on the season in points off turnover differential, which is third in the NBA. The Wolves are 26th on the season in minus 2.7. And in the last five, they're minus six. They've been getting crushed in points off turnover. So I think Minnesota's inability to take care of the ball. I mean, they generally play at a slower pace, and so you have less possessions. And when you're turning it over a ton, it just is unfortunate because it has been a pretty efficient shooting offense for the most part. It's just they turn it over so much that um, it's been a struggle. So if they can not turn it over as much and get up a ton of threes and try to make it a little bit more of a math equation against a really strong Knicks offense, I think that's kind of the path for the Wolves.
And the Knicks have been struggling with some of these turnovers too. I mean, like I said, it's been an up and down January, and the team has just been turning the ball over, which has been a little uncharacteristic. The last couple of seasons they've been really good at just protecting the rock, getting to the half court sets, and that's why they love to work the half court sets, so it helps them protect the rock. They're not really that, that's why I even say talk about fast break scoring. Like when they do push, it's nice to see, but they don't push it enough because it can sometimes lead to turnovers. And so this is a team where I'm just pulling it up right now. I'm just looking through the month of January, and this team has just been it's been just so up and down. It's just like it's so uncharacteristic for them that I would like if you talk about turnovers tomorrow. I mean, I look at the last game. Timberwolves won the turnover battle, had two less, and Knicks still won the game. But that's that's just who they are. That's just who they've been. And yeah, Knicks are averaging right now through the month of January 14 turnovers per game, which is a little uncharacteristic, man. It's just been a little uncharacteristic for the team. But definitely, I can see the turnover battle and getting out into fast break scoring. And that's where Minnesota won, right? And that's where they scored 23 fast break points to the Knicks 14 in the last game. So if the Timberwolves want to really get ahead, it's going to have to be out and scoring. And if you look at the numbers, the Knicks are like a decent team when it comes to, stopping opponents in fast break scoring. But
Yep, seventh
realistically,
in the
it's
league.
yeah. But realistically, when you watch them, they're actually not that good at like stopping fast break. Like their communication in transition is just not pristine, and that just goes to their entire defense as a whole. The communication is just a little lackluster at this point. So if the Timberwolves are able to get out and just consistently run on this team, because a team that is athletic can run, that's just been the Knicks' Achilles heel for the
And
most
that'll be
part.
interesting to see too, because the Wolves have really liked to run when they get into that Randle and Naz Reid front court, which is what they've been rocking pretty much whenever Rudy Gobert is not on the floor. And Dante's been a huge part of that. I mean, Julius certainly knows what Dante can do in transition from their time together in New York. I mean, how many transition banger threes did Randle drop off for DiVincenzo during their time together? But that's certainly been important. And Julius, when he's gotten rebounds, and he really likes to push it and go, and he's tried to do that a lot more of late, and it's part of the reason why he's been a lot more effective. So that's certainly something that I would keep an eye out for when he and Naz Reid are in the front court together.
All right. Well, let's get into the next part of this matchup, man. I'm going to talk about the key matchup of the game, and my key matchup of the game is none other than Mikal Bridges versus Anthony Edwards. I mean, I don't even want to talk about the nickname Wingstop at this point, man. Because there is so much hope for OG Ananobi, Mikal Bridges, and we kind of did Josh Hart dirty, man. Like he should have been part of that Wingstop thing. He calls it Winging Hut Junior, reference to the
Of course
SpongeBob,
he does.
Weenie Hut Juniors. But like this team, like I just want more when it comes to them defensively. And this is going to be another good test for Mikal Bridges. He's been up and down too when it comes to just playing both ends of the court. Some nights offensively, it looks like everything he's figured everything out, and then other times it's like he had a strong December. Now we get back to January. It's been a little up and down defensively. It can kind of wane here, back and forth. The biggest thing is can he just fight over screens and just get in somebody's grill and just make them uncomfortable? And so I'm wondering if he's going to be able to do that against Ant Man. And I'm not looking for him to shut Ant Man down. I'm looking for him just to make him a little uncomfortable. Have to make him work twice as hard because when Edwards is comfortable and he can get downhill, There's no stopping that man. And I mean, he's shooting the three. Like, you let me know. He started off the season shooting the three ball well. Is he still shooting the three ball well? Because if
I
he's
I
able to get downhill and then get comfortable everywhere else, it's going to be hell
I
on earth.
I do not take this. I do not say this lightly. He has been like prime Steph Curry from three,
Wow,
shooting like 42.5% on over 10 attempts a game. Like he's been awesome from three. And
that is
part of it is
insane.
just because other teams have done such a good job of building a wall and keeping him out of the paint that, it's like, hey, if I can't, I'm not going to keep driving into a crowd over and over again. If I can just pull up from three and, uh, teams are going to go under me on that Rudy Gobert high ball screen. If teams are going to go under me, like I'm going to keep shooting the ball from three, and it's worked out really well for him. And I think that's my first thing. Like if Mikal Bridges wants to get over the top of the screen and rely on some of the help defenders, if OG Anunoby or Josh Hart are going to play in the gaps and help on Anthony Edwards drives with how good of hands those guys have, there's no doubt in my mind that the Knicks should be able to keep Anthony Edwards bottled up. I mean, the other part of it too is Ant's averaging 6 turnovers a game over his last 3 games. He's had 5, 7, and 6 turnovers his last 3 games. And his 3-point shot has really been his saving grace over the whole entire month of January. And so I think for the Wolves, it'll really depend on how well they move the ball. And with Mike Conley being in the starting lineup more than likely tomorrow, they'll try to get to that Mike Conley, Rudy Gobert pick and roll that's been really good for him. And then that helps get Anthony Edwards the ball on the second side of the floor. And then he's able to play off of the catch. And it's been easier for him to get downhill that way rather than doing it in a primary, pick and roll or dribble handoff action with Gobert. And so with all the length that the Knicks have, the Wolves really have to help Ant by passing the ball and just making quick decisions to try to move the defense so that he can, get into all of his jabs and step backs and pump fakes that can help create even more space for himself. So for me, it all starts with whether or not Mikal goes over or under those screens. I'd imagine he goes over, but if he does start to go under, I mean, that's kind of the recipe for Ant to try to get hot early is making a couple of threes early on in the first quarter. And then, who knows what can happen from there when the defense has to extend out to him.
Yeah, and for Bridges, like for him offensively, like when you watch him get going, it's not that he's going out there and initiating his own right offense. It's that he's usually working off of the play unfolding, and then there's been a lot of ball movement. The defense is a little, in a frazzle, and so then he's able to get to his spots. He loves that mid range turnaround jumper. He just loves getting to the mid range in general. He loves getting to the corners and knocking down threes, especially when he gets it going. And this is a guy who just knows how to work backdoor cuts, just cutting in general. And so Bridges, for him offensively, he's going to be working off ball primarily. And that's just going to be due to the fact that Brunson and Cat, or if Cat plays tomorrow, that those guys are going to be doing a lot of the work. They're going to draw a lot of the attention, and then he can just fill in when necessary. And so that's how I see that game unfolding. But the question, I guess, for you is, do you see Ant guarding Bridges, or who do you see Ant going to be getting OG? Like who? Okay, so there we go.
I think they'll put McDaniels on Jalen Brunson.
Right.
They'll probably put Ant on OG, I would imagine. And then I think they'll put Mike Conley on Mikal. And Mike
Interesting.
Conley has kind of been in that chaser role. And I think Mikal is a guy who's not quite as physical, isn't going to overpower Mike Conley as much, but he'll certainly put the ball on the deck and elevate over him in the mid range. And so I think if Mikal can become kind of Brooklyn Mikal a little bit in terms of his aggressiveness as a scorer with the ball in his hands, that's going to be really important. But I mean, Mikal had like 29 points in this first matchup, in part because of that matchup that he had. And so I think he honestly is the guy that I would be looking at. Underdog, get your over points bets in for Mikal Bridges, because I think he's gonna have plenty of shot opportunities, especially if Karl Anthony Towns doesn't play. I don't think that's going to change the Wolves' defensive alignment too much, but it certainly will change the shot diet for the Knicks in terms of who's taking the most shots. But certainly I think Mikal will have a good matchup. Whether it's Mike Conley, it maybe even be Nickeil Alexander-Walker if he slots into the starting lineup. So it'll be interesting to see how Chris Finch decides to go tomorrow in the starting lineup.
For sure. And so, Jack, let's round this thing out with our X factors for tomorrow's game, and then get ourselves out of here. Who's your X factor? You're my guest, man. Who's your X factor for tomorrow's game?
I want to say Josh Hart just
No,
because.
I'm talking about for the Timberwolves. I'm
Oh,
going to
I
give you
know,
mine.
I know. That's where you're going. So I wanted to say Josh Hart, Mr. Triple Double on the offensive glass. No,
Just
I'm gonna go
two
with
triple doubles away from tying Walt Clyde Frazier.
that's quite the company to be in. But no, I'm gonna go with Rob Dillingham.
Mm,
So Rob Dillingham, I know he's not really been in the rotation at all this season. He's dealt with a nagging right ankle sprain that's kept him out for the better part of the last month. But he's had a couple of appearances in the G League and is certainly going to get called into action tomorrow with Dante DiVincenzo being out and the Wolves certainly needing to manufacture some scoring in the backcourt. So he's done a good job of injecting some pace into the game and getting the team to get out and run in transition. And he's been a really just a highlight machine in terms of some of his passes and the way that he's been able to shake defenders with a really strong razzle dazzle, bag of tricks he's got with the ball in his hands. And so I think if he can get in that second unit and really be an aggressive scorer coming off screens in the mid-range game, spotting up from three, and trying to at least break down some of the defense, get into the paint and kick it out and create some open three-point shots for guys like Mike Conley or Naz Reid or Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think he's going to be really important, and it is a decent enough spot to go up against a guy like Deuce McBride or Jalen Brunson, who aren't huge guards, and they're not going to totally physically overpower Rob because Rob's only like 6'3", 170 pounds, 6'2", 170 pounds. So it's certainly you have to pick and choose your battles a little bit with when you're putting Rob out there so that you're not hanging him out to dry. But I think it is a good spot for him against the Knicks, considering there are a couple of smaller guards that he might be able to hang with on the defensive end of the floor and not just get, totally abused by, obviously having some gap help and things like that. But I think in terms of what he's going to be able to provide on the offensive end of the floor, try to provide the same spark that he has at certain points earlier on in the season when the Timberwolves have been down, one of Dante or Mike or Nickeil, that's certainly going to be important for the Timberwolves and something that I personally am hoping that Chris Finch goes to. But certainly other Timberwolves fans are hoping to as well, just because they haven't really played any of their young guys for the most part this season. And that's certainly why I think a lot of Timberwolves fans are upset that, not only are you about 500, but you're kind of 500 without really accomplishing anything of, getting Nas more minutes or getting Rob meaningful experience, things like that. So I'm hoping that getting Rob Dillingham fired up at Madison Square Garden tomorrow could be a fun X factor for the Wolves.
all right, so you're thinking Rob Dillingham. I'm not going to go Josh Hart because I feel like I mean, at this point, he like yes, Mr. Everything. He does it all. Like you kind of know what to expect from him on a night to night basis, and like he impacts the game in so many ways where it's like, is he even an X factor anymore? Just because he just does it on a night to night basis where it's like I got to go with guys who are like in a slump. You're not expecting them at times, and that's why I'm going with OG Anunoby for tomorrow because he's been in a shooting slump. His defense has waned a little bit. He looks like he needs a break. He looks like he needs the All Star break to come sooner rather than later. This guy, he's knock on wood has been very healthy. To start the season, been playing a lot of minutes. He's played. I don't think he's missed one game. Like he even had a scary fall against OKC like 2 3 weeks ago, and he's still playing. I'm like, wow, that is luck. So knock on wood for that. But I'm gonna go with OG just because he does look a step slow. His shooting has just dipped a bit. I'm looking for him just to get back into some rhythm. And the thing that he does the best is like what Mikal does, where it's just working off ball, knocking down the open shots. I just want him getting back to the basics offensively. I think that will get his confidence back. Defensively, he's going to have the assignment of Julius Randle just because of physicality playing the four as well. So I'm looking for him just to do his best there as well. And because Julius likes to play in isolation, this should be a good fit for him to lock in. That's kind of where OG makes his bread and butter. Sure, he can do some good help defense, but isolation wise, being one on one in a matchup, and Randall's going to get his touches. I feel like this is what's going to get him invigorated again. But yeah, I definitely need OG to be my X factor for tomorrow because look, right now, scoring wise, I mean, he's averaging 15 points through the month of January, but he's shooting under 30% from downtown, which is, Not great. He's shooting 47% from the field, so he's getting his dunks, he's getting some, layups here and there. But even some of the layups, I'm like, man, he is struggling, like missing
But when
some
he's shooting
bunnies.
like
It is
40%
tough.
from three, he is
Oh, it's totally different.
totally different team.
Totally different team. So I'm looking for OG to be my X Factor for tomorrow. So we got Rob Dillingham, OG Ananobi as the X Factors. Jack, I appreciate you coming through and previewing this game with me. Please let the listeners know where they can find you. If you got any upcoming work we should be on the lookout for.
Yeah, absolutely. I go live after almost every single Timberwolves game on the Locked On Sports Minnesota YouTube channel with my man Luke Inman. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at JRBorman13, JRBORMAN 13, putting out Wolves content throughout the games and a little before and after too. So yeah, appreciate you having me. It was great.
Yeah, man. I had a lot of fun breaking down the game with you. Salute to Jack Borman for coming through yet again. Make sure to give him a follow and check out his work. And Knicks Nation, salute to you for coming through for another game of the week preview. Make sure to hit that thumbs up button for your boys. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. All right. Make sure to stay locked in for tomorrow. We're gonna do play-by-play. We're gonna have post-game. Look, we got the watch party back at Clinton Hall tomorrow. So make sure to go tap in and get your tickets if you haven't already done so. All right. Orange and Blue Nation, make sure to go over to Clinton Hall and go hang out with you. Go hang out with the family. Go tune into this game. It's a big game. All right. Minnesota, they're fighting to get into the top six. All right. We got Julius coming home. Dante's probably gonna be on the bench, but he's still coming home, man. We're gonna get the tribute videos and all that stuff. So make sure to stay locked in and tapped in for tomorrow's game. And got a shout out to all the franchise channel members too. Shout out to John Talento. Shout out to P. McG, shout out to you for coming through. Who else we got in here? We got KG74 as the regular, always tapping in. We got B Wolves. We got I'm watching. I'm sure you are watching. We got Sports with BI. Shout out to you as well. Who else we got in here? We got Will Mersado as well. Shout out to you for tapping in as well. Ari from Taiwan. Shout out to you, my guy. Thank you for always tapping in as well. And we got Nostalgic Nick in here too. Shout out to all you guys for coming through and supporting another game of the week preview. Always supporting the channel. Like as always, if you couldn't catch the show live, you can always find us on any audio listening platform: Apple, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon, Alexa, Stitcher, you name it. We're all over the place. So make sure to tap in there if you couldn't catch us live. Knicks Nation, appreciate you once again. We out. CP, don't tell me you're doing this again, my guy. We are still live, aren't we? Oh, this is just comical at this point. Now CP's just doing this on purpose. Now I know you're just doing this on purpose. Now I know you're just doing this on purpose. What is going on here? Ah, oh, brother. CP, where you at?
Hey, that laundry must be
That laundry, man. Here we go.
So what, you got the Wolves by what, 10 tomorrow? 15 tomorrow?
15. Oh, here we go. Here's the after show, everybody. All right. Yeah, we're gonna be talking about what we got by 10, 15. Man. What's the
No,
spread? What's the spread for tomorrow's game?
I would think it's like 8 or 9.
8 or 9. I feel like it's gonna
That's
be a
what I
close.
would that's what I would put it at.
I
That
feel
might
like it's
even
good.
be low.
I feel like it's gonna be another close one, man. I feel like it's gonna be another close one.
3.5. Wow.
Not necessarily another close one because it wasn't close the first one, but I feel like it will be a close one. I feel like they're gonna want revenge after getting waxed the last game, but
Yeah,
who knows?
that was a crazy game.
I mean, I'm sure Cat dropping 40, man. What he had 40, 20 that game.
Yeah, he was awesome. It was really cool. Like I talked to Carl in the locker room a decent amount, just like when the cameras aren't on. He's a great dude, easy to talk to, and and it was really, and so like you're around these guys all the time, you see them warm up, whatever, and it was really cool that that night he always warms up with his AirPods in, like always. And that night purposely didn't have them on because he wanted to kind of have everyone there. Is he trolling? Is he pump faking, doing the mellow pump fake here?
No, you know what? I was enjoying like this after hours conversation here, man. It's kind of like the overtime version of the show, man. This guy Jack's got stories for days, man. You know, it's good stuff, man.
Oh, brother, here we go.
Yeah, good stuff.
Now I knew this was planned at this point. Now I know you're just messing with me at this point.
Yeah, good stuff, fellas. Good stuff. All right, we're gonna sign out. So to everybody in the chat, man, hit the like button, hit the share button, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you guys are following Jack Borman, man. JR Borman 13, Twitter and Instagram. Al, good show, man.
Appreciate you, bro. Appreciate you, Jack. All right, everyone, we out.